Okay. Then, alright. So it's good to be with you all. We're experimenting with a different location here in the house. You'll have to let us know what you think of this location, because this is probably where we're going to be broadcasting from now on. Who knows? We're just playing around. And this is how we learn. So you've got sound and video. So we're playing around with broadcasting from my study. We're using both a different server and a different location, different studio. So that's how it goes. So let me start off with some questions that were mailed in to me. If you don't have sound or picture, then it turns out it's your problem, because apparently some people do. Actually, just somebody let me know if that, yeah, people do have sound and picture. So if you don't, then you got a problem with your computer. All right, somebody asked me, could you speak to the difference between enabling and loving in an adult relationship, not in parenting, because we often speak about parenting. Is it loving unconditionally without judgment or expectation, for example, to get your alcoholic spouse that 5th beer that he's asking for, or to pick up, for example, pain pills at the pharmacy, or, for example, let's say you've got a spouse who's a sex addict, to have sex for the 3rd time that day? Outstanding questions. Is that enabling, or is that loving? And what's the difference? And it's really about motivation. It's really not our place as partners to be teaching our spouses. So it is different in an adult relationship. With children, it is our role to be teaching our kids and to be applying consequences, but not so with adult partners. So with a child, you would withhold alcohol, you would withhold things that aren't good for them, whereas with children, whereas with adults, it's a different thing. So you make a choice as to what you're going to do, as to what you're able to do in a loving way. But you don't withhold what you're going to do to teach your partner a lesson. So let's say, for example, that you're in the kitchen and your partner says, would you bring me a piece of chocolate cake? And you were in a loving place and you felt like that was something you were willing to do. Well, you would. Now let's say that your partner's an alcoholic and your partner is lucid. Your partner's not breaking things. Your partner's not, taking an axe to the wall. And your partner says, would you bring me a beer? Now, I realize that a beer is probably not the best thing for your partner. I get that. But you're in a loving place, and your partner says, would you bring me a beer? You would do that for anybody else. So, would you do that for your partner? I would. Yeah, it's not the best thing for your partner, but yeah, I would. Because I'm not willing to turn that into a point of contention, and I'm willing to do that because to refuse to do it would keep me from being a loving person. That's the point. Now, if my partner were getting to the point where she was, for example, becoming contentious or cursing or screaming, or where the alcohol was making her violent, and she said, "Bring me a beer," then I'd say, if you want a beer, the beer's in here. Then she could get up from the couch, which of course by then maybe she wouldn't be able to get up from the couch, which is the point of me saying you can get up and get the beer if you'd like. Then I probably wouldn't, because then to get the beer I would feel like would be enabling as opposed to loving. Same thing with sex addiction or drugs or anything else. If my sex addict partner said, "I want to have sex," and I felt like I was in a loving place, I would. But if my sex addict partner said for the third time that day, "Get over here and have sex," and I didn't feel like having sex, then I'd say, I just don't feel like having sex. It's according to what I felt like I was loving enough to do. If you feel forced to do it, you're not in a place where you feel like it's something you can do in a loving way, then it's not a loving act anymore. And then you are enabling. So it's all about the motivation, not the act. And about whether you feel like you're teaching them a lesson or whether you feel like you're being forced to do it or obligated. If you feel like you're being forced or you feel like you're obligated to do it, then you're enabling. So it's about motivation. Here's somebody who said, this is the woman who last time we talked wrote about her daughter and the bunny. I don't know if you remember that. But she wrote about the girl who asked for a bunny, so she got her daughter a bunny. I don't remember the age of the girl, but 9 or 12, I think. And so she got her daughter a bunny, and then later her friend got a bunny, but the bunny was lop-eared. So her friend's bunny had longer ears, and her daughter wanted to take the bunny back because she thought her friend's bunny was cuter, and the mother was going to take the bunny back. And I'm going, you got to be kidding me. And the daughter was crying, and we have a real tendency as parents, to give in when there's crying. And I said, you give in on this, and then it's going to be giving in on everything. Because then what? Then you get a cell phone, and 5 minutes later, a cuter cell phone is going to come out in a different color, or in a more advanced technology, or one with a better camera in it, or whatever, or a better computer, or you get a car and a new model comes out, or whatever. Or this is going to happen with boyfriends, or a husband, or, name it. Look at what you're going to be teaching the kid. There's always going to be a new model of whatever come out, and you're teaching the kid that. As soon as you're tired of a thing, well, then throw it away and get another one. So, no, you got the bunny. And in this case, it's a living thing. And the point is, you learn to love it rather than demand that it love you and entertain you. So the mother wrote me back within, a couple of days. And she said this: "Thanks for answering my email in the video chat." She said, "I watched it on the archive," because she was doing something that night. She said, I'm glad you were laughing, because as you remember last week I was laughing about the bunny." She said, "I started to laugh too, and that made me feel better. The point that you made about this type of situation advancing to cell phones and cars and so on really hit home. I saw the bigger implication of what seems silly but is not. Because of this insight, I did not cave in to the demands and manipulation. Good for you. Yippee. Which I have been doing for all my daughter's life. So I took your suggestion and I took Kim, my daughter, to the pet store that has rescued bunnies for adoption. One bunny was the same breed as my daughter's and was all lonely and sad in the cage. And my daughter said, "Mom, can we adopt it?" Another bunny in the cage. And I paused and looked at her and said softly, "No, she has the wrong ears." In other words, the same ears as my daughter's. And my daughter really got it. She said tears welled up in her eyes, and she said that she loved her rabbit and was just falling for peer pressure and was jealous, thinking that her friend had something better than she did. So that evening she played with her own bunny happily and did all the chores to take care of her own bunny. She said a prayer for the rescue bunny to find a good home. When she went to bed, she told me she learned something, and I asked her what. She said she learned not to be jealous of others and to be happy with what she has. I'm thinking that she was feeling loved at this point. Yeah. She said, "Greg, I think this was because for the first time she realized she couldn't manipulate me with her tears, and it really hit home for me. It really hit home for her. I remained calm in my behavior with her through the whole situation by the miracle of real love. Thanks for allowing me to see how an issue like this could really manifest bigger as she grows into an adult." Yeah. This was a wonderful learning and growing experience for me. I feel even more connected, watching the archives. It's really important that we as parents understand that as we give in to our kids, we teach them horrifying lessons. As we give in to them and say, oh, sure, that'll be fine. Then they manipulate us for the next thing and the next thing. And it's not about us giving in to them. What we're doing is we're teaching them the value, the reward of their getting behaviors. And then they spend their whole life using them, thinking that that's how they find happiness. And then eventually what they learn is that getting behaviors and protecting behaviors will let them down in horrifying ways. And what they do is they learn this lesson, when they're 40, instead of learning this lesson when they're 9. And it's much cheaper to learn this lesson when you're 9 at home with loving parents than to just be beaten bloody, actually be beaten to death when you're 40 or 50. So it turns out that it's just a hugely loving act on the part of parents to say no. See the point? It's loving to say no rather than to say yes, and in the end really kill our children. It's just very destructive. Here's a mother who said, yesterday I told my 11-year-old to go handle something with her 3 sisters. She's the oldest of the girls. They were working on a project, and as she went down the stairs, she started yelling at them to get up here and do their part. So this is the older kid yelling at the other kids. So the mother said, I told her in a nice tone to not yell at her sisters. She instantly replied, well, you yell sometimes. So I said, yes, you're right. I do yell sometimes, but I'm trying not to do that. I make mistakes sometimes, but I'm going to try to not yell. When I have yelled at you, did you like it? No. Well, your sisters probably don't like it when you yell at them, so maybe you can try to not yell too. And in parentheses she said, I think I did pretty good on this one since I talked in a normal, loving tone the whole time, but I should have left out that last part about how she needs to not yell too and just focused on me. She was kind of asking a question. And that's the mistake, is that we tell our kids what not to do. So here's this older child yelling at the other kids. And the mistake was saying, so you shouldn't yell. What we should do, or what is more productive, because I'm not going to tell you what to do, just like you telling them what to do is unproductive. What's more productive is to simply say, you're looking pretty unhappy when you yell at your sisters, is to explore how they're feeling while they do that. And then when she says, well, yeah, I'm unhappy because those bratty little, snotty little children, and so let her scream and yell. And then say, so you're feeling unhappy because, and then explore the cause. She's feeling unhappy because she can't control those children. That's what she's feeling unhappy about. And then explore, you feel unhappy, so you feel unhappy because you can't control them, and do you have a right to control them? No, you really don't. And so what would be more effective than controlling them? They're behaving like they do because they don't feel loved by you. And you have acted like exactly like they do because you don't feel loved. You don't feel loved by who? Me. And you hate it when I control you. So you feel much happier. This is you talking to your oldest daughter, the older one. You feel much happier when I treat you how? When I love you. And when I love you, you're just thrilled to do almost anything I ask you to do. So what do you think would work mucho better with the kids? If you did with them what you love it when I do with you. And so you explore with her what she could say with them that would work better. You teach her what would work better, rather than telling her what not to do. Gosh, telling people what not to do is kind of like dumb. I mean, it's kind of like when I was teaching residents how to operate. Can you imagine if, when a resident sat down to operate on somebody, all I said was, don't do that? Well, no, don't do that either. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Can you imagine? They would scream running out of the room in frustration in 3 minutes. If I only said, don't do that and don't do that. What they want to hear is, do this. Or, okay, watch this. If I do this, this would work much better. People want to hear what to do. They want to hear constructive suggestions. Whereas just what not to do, you just drive them crazy. How's the color looking, by the way?
It's a bit.
It's still a little bit? All right.
There's no wall questions.
Okay. Here's a woman who says, my husband says that I'm controlling him all the time. I don't mean to, I'm just offering him suggestions. Her husband wrote in saying, she's a controlling witch with a B. She tells me what to wear, what lane to drive in, when to shut the door, everything. It completely turns me off. And then she comes back with, and then he withdraws from me. He's not close to me. He's never intimate with me. This is a real problem. And why would he want to be intimate with her? I mean, and this is a very common problem in relationships. It's she attacks and controls him, comes at him with criticism and pushing and attacking and doing this, and he withdraws. Now, both of their behaviors are unloving. Which is worse? Well, neither one. They're both unloving. So there's attacking on the one hand and withdrawing on the other. Both are selfish. Both are getting and protecting behaviors. Hers is mostly getting. She's attacking and controlling to get a feeling of power. His is protecting. He withdraws from her so that he can feel safe. And this is a difficult concept for many people to understand. They're both being selfish. But in most relationships like this, even though they're both being selfish, almost uniformly in relationships where people have this problem, she's more the problem. I'm not saying she's more at fault, because they're both selfish, they're both unloving, they're both empty and afraid. But you can't tell somebody who is frightened and withdrawing to go and be sweet and loving towards somebody who's towering over them and attacking and frightening them. So in most cases with a couple like this, you have to tell the attacker and the controller that they've got to quit it. So in this case, you have to tell her that for some prolonged period of time, she has to learn to quit that behavior. He just doesn't feel safe. When there's somebody in the room who's got a gun and they're shooting everybody, the person with the gun has to quit that. They just do. Safety is first. I mean, it's plastered on the walls of manufacturing companies everywhere. Safety first. When there's somebody who's shooting people, everybody has to feel safe before you can address anything else. So in this case, when you're angry, sweetie, and you're attacking your husband and controlling and criticizing, you're going to have to learn to close your mouth. And if you feel like controlling him and criticizing him and telling him what to do, then you can call your coach or get on in the chat rooms or get on teleconference calls or whatever and tell everybody all the things that you think are wrong with him. Fine. If you think he needs to change his life in a million ways, you might be right. But don't tell him because he doesn't need to hear it. He really doesn't need to change who he is to participate in your relationship. So tell everybody on the planet before you talk to him. Say absolutely nothing. In fact, if you said absolutely nothing for 30 days, nothing to him, I'll bet he'd consider that just an absolute vacation. And when he feels safer, then in the meantime, he can be talking to loving people. And when he gets to the point where he feels safe around you, he can learn to be more loving toward you. But he really can't learn to do that while you have your fangs bared. He just can't. So you both need to learn to be loving. That is a fact. But it's just the truth that you're going to have to learn to quit attacking him first. Here's somebody who says, as many of you know, my 82-year-old, my 82-year young father became ill and was hospitalized 2 weeks ago with bleeding in his brain, and he was moved to hospice the next day. We spent all last week in hospice, and he passed away on Saturday, the 24th. I didn't know that. Services start tomorrow night, and the funeral is this Thursday. I have many stories of blessings to share, but for right now, I want to tell you all that without real love, I have no idea how I would have handled this situation, as I have been overwhelmed. My attitude and understanding of what I needed to do here for my father and mother and all concerned amazes me, as well as the many real love people calling and visiting and even planning to attend the funeral with me. I love you all and thank you for your love and seeing me while moving through this. I've heard many stories like this as people have approached death and then participated in the deaths of their own loved ones and participated in the deaths of the loved ones of friends. Death can be just, oh my, such a traumatic experience for people. I've had good friends whose friends have had loved ones die, and they go and attend the bedsides of these people who are dying, and oh my, it's such an opportunity for people to just go berserk. It's a frightening experience for the loved ones, and it's also an opportunity for people to really milk everyone around them for imitation love. People who really weren't even close to the person who is dying or died. And there's weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth and look at me, and so many emotions and fears come into play, and oh my goodness. And when you understand what real love is, and you're able to enter that situation and understand that all people want is to feel loved, and you enter and offer that to people, it can just utterly calm everybody down. It just makes all the difference in the world. And it's not that you're minimizing anybody's fears. You're not doing that. It's not that you're minimizing the death. It's not that you're minimizing their grief. No, none of that. But instead of doing what many people do, which is, oh, I'm so sorry, and I'm so sad, instead of adding to everybody's sorrow and pain and fear, you're saying, what do you need? What can I offer? I've come here to love you. I've come here as a source of what everybody wants most. I've come here to be with you. I've come here to care about you, to offer you what you want. That can be so stabilizing. Just a couple of weeks ago, just about the same time you're talking about here, a good friend of mine lost her husband. And it was 6:30 in the morning, and half an hour later she called and said that her husband died. And so I went over to the house, and similar situation, real opportunity for people to be very upset. And I just visited with the family and loved them and prayed with them, and they couldn't get him out of his bed onto the gurney that goes to the funeral home, to the hearse, and so I just helped lift his body onto the gurney and talked with the family about their plans, and they were all in a big tizzy about, what are we going to do for a memorial service, and what will people think, and gosh, what do all the friends need, and I just asked them questions. The man who had died was a very private, quiet man, and didn't care what people thought. So I asked that. I said, we'll call him Fred. I said, I talked to Fred about this before he died because I knew this would come up. Fred didn't care about a memorial service. He didn't care if anyone came. He was being cremated, and he wanted his ashes spread out over the ocean with only his family there. So he didn't care about a memorial service. Now, I'm not telling you guys, you're his family, what to do, but he didn't care. So do you care? And everybody just let out a breath and said, we don't care either. So that took care of, $1,000 expense and worry and fussing. People just need to have somebody care about them and not be upset and not fuss. And I think that's what you're describing here, is that you had a lot of people care about you and what you needed, and it just can be very settling. Here's somebody who says, Greg, can you say more on the difference between being patient with someone and loving and being loved by them? I think the phrase being patient with someone is just enormously condescending. When I say to you, well, I'll just have to be patient with you. It implies that I'm making a judgment of you, that I'm in a superior position to you, that I will tolerate you. I mean, think about it. As I even say that, I will be patient with you. I mean, isn't it just irritating to you? Do you feel loved when I say I'll be patient with you? Doesn't it even imply that there's like a limit? I mean, patience always has a limit, doesn't it? There's always a limit to my patience. I don't know anybody who enjoys being the object of somebody else's patience. Whereas if I simply accept you and love you and care about your happiness, gosh, who doesn't like that? I love it when you love me. Whereas if you tell me that you're being patient with me, I'm not sure I enjoy that. I mean, I'll take it, but I'm not so sure I'd ask for your patience. It's kind of like being the object of your forgiveness. The same kind of thing. Patience and forgiveness imply a position of superiority and judgment, and that somehow I have the right to judge you and be patient with you and forgive you. Whereas, gosh, simply understanding you, seeing you, accepting you, loving you, gosh, those are sweet words. Whereas patience and tolerating and forgiving you, wow, those are pretty judgmental words. Here's a woman who says, I have a question. I was beginning a friendship with a lady, and right from the start, she made it clear that she only wanted friends who were on her same spiritual path. The last time we got together, she stated that she didn't want to handle any friendships with people who did activities outside what her religion allows. I knew that some things that I do would infringe on her standards, so I decided to tell her about them so that she could make her own choice about whether to be friends. That's just brilliant. I thought I'd made a loving choice, but later that day during my coaching call, my coach said, I don't have to tell people stuff like that. Sometimes it's loving to withhold information that pushes other people's buttons and let them find out on their own. I feel like that's dangerously close to lying, and I said that right now I'd rather err too much on the side of truth than lie and fool myself that I'm doing it lovingly. If somebody tells me that they only want friends who are on a certain spiritual path, or that they only want friends who believe in certain religious beliefs, or they don't want to do anything that contradicts certain religious behaviors. Boy, if somebody tells you, I only want people who are within this circle. Now, if they don't tell me that, then I'm not going to burden them with a whole lot of information. But if somebody says, I only want people who fit in this circle, well then I feel pretty obligated in giving them a lot of information, because they've told me, I want friends who are round. Well, then, gosh, then I do feel obligated in telling them, well, I'm a little oval, actually, because that's useful information. because then they get to make more useful decisions about whether they want to spend time with me. Like, for example, let's say that somebody says, I want absolutely nothing to do with anybody. I don't want to go anywhere, ever, with anybody who smokes. I'm a complete non-smoking freak. And what if I smoke? And I can't stand to be in a car for longer than 3.2 minutes without smoking. And somebody calls me and says, well, I'd like to go to a movie with you. Well, then I would be an idiot not to tell that person that I'm a smoker, wouldn't I? That would be a useful little tidbit of information. So I'm agreeing with you that, normally I wouldn't share a lot of information about myself, but for a freaky non-smoker, I would say, by the way, 3.2 minutes as long as I can go without a cigarette, then I would. But normally I wouldn't. For example, I would not share my religion with somebody. But if somebody says, I'm very picky about the religions that I spend my time with, then I would go, oh, then I better tell you what mine is. See? So it depends on who it is. But no, normally I wouldn't. Somebody says, if you wish, tell us a little bit about the coaching program. I'm probably like the wrong person to ask, just because I don't run the coaching program. But there is a coaching program run by Andy Carrillo. He'd be the one to talk to, because he runs it and teaches it and all that. Now, it's a combination of online and once a month we get together and do an in-person seminar, so it's very interactive for 2 days, so that part's huge. The part I play in that is that for now, at least, and for the foreseeable future, I'm teaching those online seminar, or those in-person seminars, so I'm pretty heavily involved in that part, but I don't manage it. I don't manage the program. And the next one of those seminars is June 14th and 15th, which will be here in Atlanta. Now, those are also available to anybody who's not in the coaching program. I cannot highly recommend too highly those seminars, because we go into just enormous interactive detail, the application of the real love principles with individuals, with couples, and so on. This next one will be focusing a lot on victimhood, which is the root of all the getting and protecting behaviors. We won't be doing only victimhood. Anybody who asks a question that's outside of victimhood, we're still going to deal with. But if you really want to understand the principles of real love, come to one of these seminars. They're utterly indispensable. People say, well, how do I really get to the meat of understanding real love? Come to a seminar, really. You can read books, you can do the teleconference calls, you can come to the video chats, all hugely helpful. But people who come to a seminar say, wow, now I get it now. It does. It makes a big difference. So the coaching program is the purpose of it is to train coaches who can then work with people on a professional basis and just simply help them absorb and understand the principles of real love faster. Let's see. Next question. Somebody says, I'm noticing that I use people all the time. I'm always trying to please them, make them happy, make them like me. I do things for them. I thank them constantly. How do I stop that? This is a very common behavior. I was in a group like 8 years ago, and there was this sweet little lady. She was like 65 years old. They even called her Grandma, I can't remember her name now, Grandma Miller, something. And people said, well, they said, I don't understand this whole getting and protecting behaviors. They said, for example, Grandma Miller, they pointed to her. Here she was attending her first real love group. They said, Grandma Miller has no getting and protecting behaviors. She's an absolutely happy woman, 65 years old, and she's happy all the time. And she's never been taught the principles of real love, and yet she's perfectly happy. So why does she need to learn about real love? And I took one look at Grandma Miller, and it was obvious that she was an angry woman. And I said, I don't think Grandma Miller is as happy as you think. And they said, well, of course she is. Grandma Miller is the absolute prototype, the paragon of virtue. She is the Mother Teresa of our community. She's always doing things for people. She serves on every committee on the planet. She brings dinner to everyone. She serves, she helps, and they went on and on and on. And I said, and you know what? I'll bet she's absolutely sick and tired of it. And and this sweet little white-haired lady started cursing and swearing in this room full of people who admired her to death and said, I am blankety, blankety, blank, 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 words they'd never heard her say, tired of it. And I thought these people were going to get up and run from the room. She had been doing what this person here says. I'm always trying to please people, make them happy, make them like me. I do things for them. She said she was sick of it. She had been earning people's praise her whole life, and so what she'd been doing was she had been lying her entire life and trying to earn people's approval. And nobody knew it. But she had this look of anger in her. And I said, I'll bet you have no relationship with your husband at all. And she said, no, I don't. Because I said, because your husband is sick of this game and you don't get to earn praise from him anymore. She said, that's right. So I recommended to her what I'm recommending to this person here. You simply have to note it. You note every time you're earning the approval of other people. You note it before you're about to do it. You note it during it. You note it afterward, and you ask yourself, what am I getting? What am I getting from it? All you're earning is conditional love, which is garbage. It's worthless. People give you their conditional approval, and it's never unconditional love. It never makes you happy, and it never will. So you ask yourself, what do I really want? Do I want to keep earning people's conditional approval? Or do I want real love in my life? Do I want to keep up this behavior and die miserable? So I'm not telling you to stop it. I never will. But do I want to keep doing this thing that has made me unhappy for the rest of my life? Then, what would I like to do instead? Would I like to, instead of doing this, come to group, make conference calls, and tell people the truth about myself? That I am an angry, miserable, unhappy woman, and I'd prefer, instead of earning people's conditional approval, I'd prefer to be accepted for who I really am. Your choice. That's how you change your life. So, it's your choice. But earning this conditional approval thing is never, never going to work. This extended weekend, new question, or new comment, we'll see whether it turns into a question or a comment. This extended weekend, I took my 3 11/12-year-old son, we'll round it up. I took my 4-year-old son to my parents' house. When we were leaving, I allowed my son to hook up to his video player and his headphones prior to pulling out of the driveway and prior to saying goodbye. My mistake in that space. We'll see why that's a mistake. However, before I backed out, I asked him to take his headphones off. He took them off, and then I asked if he wanted to say goodbye. He, of course, said no. So before he put his headphones back on, I said goodbye to my parents and then said goodbye like he would say goodbye. Gam and Papa Oak. I could feel the displeasure coming from my parents that I did not make my son say goodbye. Whew! Am I spoiling him by not giving him a consequence for not saying goodbye? I feel like I'm doing the correct thing because I want him to give his goodbyes as a gift. Oh, honey, you are such a wise parent. He's a 4-year-old kid, and it's not up to a 4-year-old kid to have to say goodbye to his grandparents. It's the grandparents who are acting like spoiled children if they require a 4-year-old to say goodbye to them. You've got to be joking. A 4-year-old's a baby. And if you put a 4-year-old in the car, it's up to us as adults to love our children. Now, it's never up to the child to love us in return. So, yes, you screwed up by not remembering that your parents are spoiled babies and require the love of their 4-year-old grandchild to say goodbye to them before he leaves. I mean, they're the ones with the problem, and it's a very common problem. I'm making fun of them, I admit. But that's a very common thing amongst adults, that they require the goodnight kiss, they require the goodbye, they require the gratitude. I mean, when grandparents give a gift to the child, they're the ones that have the little fuss if the grandchild doesn't sufficiently go, oh, thank you so much to the grandparents. How immature is that on the part of the grandparents? When I give something to my grandchildren, I don't give a rat's butt whether my grandchildren thank me for it. They're 4. My grandkids are, let's see, 4, 6, 2, and 0. They're kids. And so when I send them something, I don't even remember that I sent it. That is not their job to be grateful to me. Are you joking? And if they get in the car and put on their headphones, because when they come here, they do put on their headphones, that's the end of that. A kid with headphones on is finished. Are you kidding me? A kid with headphones on is happy. See ya. So yeah, you screwed up. Because you understood that they do require that from a 4-year-old, which is ridiculous. But then once it's on, then it would be your obligation to turn to your parents and go, hey, I screwed up, he's got his headphones on. I'll say goodbye for you. But to give the child a consequence, like laughable. So you did well not to impose anything on the 4-year-old. That's how silly. Here's a parent who came from a seminar that we did a while ago, and she was talking about parenting. They had been having their 7-year-old son sleep in their bed and pretty much destroying their marriage. And I made some recommendations about having the 7-year-old not sleep with them anymore. And so they decided to take the steps of finally having the 7-year-old not sleep in their bed and sleep sleep by himself. So she wrote me and she said, thanks for the weekend. And she said, I want to share what happened in our home Sunday night. And she said, so we finally made the decision to have him sleep in his bed, and we explained to him what we'd be doing, that for a while we would sit by his bed and take turns, and that whichever of us would put him to bed would sit by his bed until he fell asleep. And then after that, after we did that for several nights, then we would not do that, and he would have to go to sleep on his own. But we would check on him every 3 minutes till he fell asleep. Then, when that first night came that he'd have to fall asleep on his own, he was very unhappy, which of course children are when they have to do something on their own. And so he started kicking the door, pulling on it, yelling and screaming. which of course you would expect that a child would do because they would test his parents. So my husband, Tom, when he started kicking on the door, he did exactly what I recommended that he do, which was showed up at the door with tools, switched the doorknob around so that the door would lock from the outside. That's what I recommended. So they locked the door, and you only do this for a short period of time. They locked the door for like 2 minutes at a stretch. And the kid started screaming and kicking the door like a little banshee. And they didn't remember what I'd suggested that they do. They didn't check the room thoroughly. So the kid picked up, get this, he grabbed remember he's 7 years old. He grabbed a mirror off the wall and threw it against the door and shattered the mirror all over the room. So when they went in, he had cut himself on the mirror. It wasn't a deep cut, so there's blood all over his face where he'd rubbed it. This is hysterical. So it wasn't a serious cut, but he had blood all over himself, so that he expected them to give in and sleep with him. But they didn't give in. So they wrapped up his wound and put him back to bed. I was so proud of him. So they cleaned up the glass, they put him back to bed, but they didn't finish checking the room. So he kicked on the door again. He found a photo of the 2 parents that they left in the room, and he threw that against the door and broke glass again. So picture this room. There's glass all over the place. He's bleeding. And more screaming and kicking and crying. So this is just a real power struggle. But they cleaned it up again, and eventually this kid caught on that they weren't joking. He went to bed after all this screaming and kicking and bleeding and cleaning up glass twice, and the next night, guess what happened? They put him to bed, and he went to sleep for the first time in his own bed in 7 years. It's a loving act to love and teach a child and say no. I have known children, and I'm not kidding you, how did that happen?
You might be back now.
I am, but why did that happen? Do they have to log out and back in?
No, just you did.
Okay. So I'm back. Oops.
You were back about 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
It's
Oops, sorry about that.
or 2 point something.
Really? So how much of that story did you miss? All right. So tell me, how much of that story did you miss? Can you tell me? Somebody?
Oh, Jenny said she got the whole thing.
Did you get the breaking of the glass and everything? Oh, okay. Said I didn't miss anything. So anyway, this kid broke glass and screamed, and it was just horrible. But even though there was screaming and yelling, and the kid was, after 7 years, this child learned to go to bed on his own. It's a very loving act to learn to say no to a kid. So even though it can be agonizing, the payoff is just absolutely huge. And if we don't learn to do it with our kids, the alternative is that society will teach our children. In other words, they'll learn it in jail, or their employers will teach them. And when society teaches our kids, they don't teach it to them in a loving way. So it may appear to be a painful thing, but you know, it's worth it. And it's worth it to teach ourselves these lessons too. To, for example, not give in to the temptations to use getting and protecting behaviors. This is the thing that I see over and over again in real love, is that people say, but it's so difficult to tell the truth. It's so difficult to say no to getting and protecting behaviors, but the payoff is huge. Attending teleconference calls, sometimes getting a coach, doing the right thing. It can be difficult. I get it. It was difficult for me to give up drugs. It was difficult for me to give up anger. It can be difficult to love people instead of wanting to pay them back or control them or to whatever. But in the end, it's much easier to be loving. It's much easier to tell the truth than to give in to be angry and to then be a slave to anger, to attacking, to running, to lying, to all the getting and protecting behaviors for a lifetime, and be miserable for the rest of our lives. So I look forward to seeing you guys in June, June 14th and 15th in Atlanta at our seminar there. Look on the website and register for that. You'll find it enormously rewarding. I look forward to seeing you next week on Tuesday, and we love you all. See you then.